You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 17th of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing in association with Addis. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on today's programme, the Trump administration has approved its first US weapons aid packages for Ukraine. Our Julia Jen is here. Julia, what could this development mean for the war?
Well, Tom, as you said, this is the first package, so this could be a very big step for NATO and for the US.
More from Julia on that one in a moment. The Fujikina Global Photography event kicks off here in London tomorrow. Olivia Arthur is one of the photographers showing new work. Olivia, tell us about what you're showing.
So the work that I've made for this exhibition is in relation to a project that I've been making over the past year or so, which is an exploration of the British coastline and our relationship to the sea.
Great stuff. More from Olivia on the way later as well. And Fernando Augusto Pacheco will be here to talk about the ongoing politicisation of Eurovision. Of course, all that and more ahead here on The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. Hey, very warm welcome to this Wednesday edition of the programme. The Trump administration has indeed approved its first US weapons aid package for Ukraine, marking a restart of American arms shipments to Kyiv and a new arrangement funded by Washington's allies. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Monocle writer Julia Jen. Good afternoon, Julia.
Good afternoon.
What do we know about this package? What are the weapons that have been approved? And again, give us some of the context. What is the potential impact that these specific arms could have on the broader war effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that there will be two shipments, $500 million altogether. And we know that we don't know specifics about what exactly is in the shipments. They have not released that information to the public, but they have said generally that it is air defense systems. That's huge news if these actually do end up arriving in Ukraine. I say if because so many times Biden-era shipments have been paused by the US administration and they haven't actually made it to Ukraine, or they've been cut down, they've been slashed in sort of magnitude. So we don't know if these will actually end up arriving in Ukraine. But let's say they do. These air defense systems will be super important. Ukraine is under very heavy aerial bombardment at the moment. We saw a few days ago that a Ukrainian parliamentary building was targeted for the first time. It was a rocket that actually hit. First reports was a drone and it seemed like it had been hit and fell out of the sky, so it seemed like a mistake by the Russians. But then actually it turned out that it was a rocket that didn't actually explode by some miracle on impact. So this is a really direct, aggressive attack on Ukrainian sovereignty. And last night we had Ukrainian railways under attack. So that's the actual route between the EU and Ukraine. That's actually what connects Ukraine to the rest of Europe. And that was under attack as well. So this would be a really important kind of cover for Ukraine. But let's see if they get there.
That is the first critical question, of course. One other thing that prompts me to ask you, Julia, is given the delays, the setbacks, and we know there's these complex domestic political considerations for Trump and the US to navigate, which often lies behind these compromises, where's Ukraine been sourcing the current weaponry? We've seen lots of very successful drone strikes, including some other on Russian infrastructure. But where is the ongoing supply of weaponry and munitions? Where's it coming from?
Well, this is a really tricky time. The Russian drone attack on Poland, a week ago, really diverted allies and made them think twice about sending weapons to Ukraine, because now do they have to protect their own airspaces or their own territory against Russia? We know that, for example, Sweden has really stepped up. Sweden last week approved an unprecedented amount of support to Ukraine. So they sent a one-off package, or are sending a one-off package of about $836 million worth of equipment. You've got artillery guns, drones, ammunition, etc. Really interesting as well, civilian defence initiatives in that package, so training for Ukrainian civilians. That's a fascinating topic that I wish we could get into. But yes, so Sweden, for example, has really stepped up. But as I said, there's that real worry. Poland, for example, really worrying, what can we send and what do we need to keep for ourselves? And that really goes into the heart of Russian thinking, I think, with that provocation with the drones. And also, importantly, that real emphasis on if those weapons get to Ukraine from America. We actually saw military officials from the US present at the Russia-Belarus Zapad exercises that are going on right now on the eastern flank of NATO. And that's a huge kind of move from the US. Why are they sending, for the first time since 2022, why are they sending representatives to this Russia-Belarus exercise?
Hard to ever answer that kind of speculation when it comes to the Trump administration. He's, of course, here in the UK currently. Actually, it's been the soundtrack to our morning here at Midori House, these helicopters zooming overhead, presumably from sort of Winfield House back and forth. He's at Windsor and various other locations. Presumably, we talked, I think, before last week, looking ahead, this is an opportunity for the UK government to kind of lean on Trump, try and get the UK position across for what it's worth. Is there any sense, Julia, that that's anything other than wasted breath? I mean, he's going to do what he's going to do or not, but an opportunity, I suppose, to at least kind of try to sort of bang the drum and try to make the point?
Yeah, I guess they can show the US that the world, the free world, I guess, is on Ukraine's side. So we know that King Charles will definitely be heavily leaning on Trump, sort of talking to him about this topic. This was in a Politico exclusive in the last 24 hours, that this is something that King Charles will really be focusing on when Trump is here, when he's hosting him. And I think also it goes to the heart of what is the US-UK relationship right now, because we know the US is bringing lots of sort of tech investment over. The UK is potentially going to sell out on things, in order to get that investment. But what is the UK actually pushing back on? And that commitment to Ukraine, I think, is a really important kind of cornerstone of European security. And so is the UK really going to emphasise that, guys, if we want to make this work, we have to make sure we're aligned on this particular issue. But as we said, Trump is so fickle. And, he yesterday was talking to a Ukrainian reporter. He made sure to ask where this reporter was from. And the reporter was asking, where are the Patriot systems, the air defence systems that you promised to Ukraine just so many weeks ago now, and you promised them to Ukraine, where are they? And instead, of course, of answering that question, Trump went off on a tangent, etc. So, there's a real fickle kind of character that we have to work with here.
Super interesting, and we shall chronicle the ongoing Trump visit and the impact or otherwise that has over the next couple of days. Julia, thanks very much as ever for making sense of it for us. Plenty going on around the globe today. Let's cross over to Monocle's Hassan Anderson, who's got the other news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. China has urged Israel to stop its attacks in Gaza, warning of rising civilian deaths. The Foreign Ministry called for a full, lasting ceasefire and warned against further humanitarian crises. Israel says it has opened a temporary escape route for Gaza City residents after its biggest ground offensive yet. Jerry Greenfield, the co-founder of ice cream brand Ben & Jerry's, has resigned after nearly 50 years. He says parent company Unilever has silenced the brand's social mission and stripped it of independence. Greenfield accuses Unilever of breaking its original agreement. And French retailer Carrefour has closed all of its stores in Kuwait. The company recently shut shops in Bahrain and stopped operations in Oman and Jordan. Local operator Majid Al Futtaim is replacing many Carrefour stores with its own Hypermax brand. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks, Hass, and we'll have more headlines for you at the top of the next hour when the clock ticks through 1300 here in London. You're with the briefing. Let's continue now with what some of the newspapers are covering in Japan. To cast an eye, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Monocle's Tokyo Bureau Chief and Senior Asia Editor, Fiona Wilson. Good evening, Fiona. How the devil are you?
I'm very good. It's been so hot here. I don't know if you've been watching any of the World Athletics Championships, but you might have seen a few runners keeling over. It's been really, really humid and sunny here. There
has been some extraordinary sweating going on. I'm a big track and field. Fan, actually, Fiona. I'm looking forward to the men's 1500 finalists coming up in just a couple of hours' time. I'll be watching that one. But yeah, very, very sweaty, but good vibes. I think it's interesting because obviously we covered a lot the Tokyo Olympic Games, which was somewhat denuded, weren't they? Because we didn't have all the fans there. It had been delayed. There was so much uncertainty. It looks like the city's really enjoyed, I don't know, hosting this, having everybody there, getting into it. It's sort of how the Olympics might have been almost a little bit.
100%. I mean, I really feel this has healed a few wounds. I mean, there was just such an air of pain about the 2020 or 21 Olympics as it turned out. I mean, I was in the stadium watching the 100 metres final. I mean, it was just me and about 30 other journalists. It was really, really a strange event, that whole athletics bit of the Olympics. And I think this is just brilliant to see that, a full stadium every night and people really getting behind it. And then when they had the marathons, the big walking events, people have been out on the streets. So I think it really shows what Japan can do with these events. So yes, I think it is it's erasing that awful memory of the Olympics.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And UK, Great Britain and Northern Ireland, I should say, doing well. A robust 0 medals so far, Fiona. Go team.
Yes.
They're gonna do better later. Now listen, look, Fiona, the papers, there's lots of stuff, light and shade as always. Some really interesting stuff. Let's kind of change gears a little bit. Ongoing crisis in Gaza, of course, and I'm always interested to see, what is the take on these big global stories in our different key markets. Japan's very clear, and the papers are going into this, aren't they? They won't recognise the Palestinian state. Just tell me about this one, and how do the papers kind of make sense of the decision to kind of stick to their guns on that one?
Yeah, this is such an interesting issue, because I think if you ask people maybe on the street, or, there were even, 200 politicians signed basically a petition for the foreign minister, Takeshi Iwaya, last week saying, you need to recognise Palestine. And he had a very uncomfortable press conference yesterday, Takeshi Iwaya, where he was asked specifically, will you be recognising Palestinian state? And he was a bit, hopping around saying, we're having daily discussions, we're following trends. And basically what it comes down to is the US has asked them not to recognise Palestine. And I think it really shows Japan's defence position, which is completely dependent on the US. And it doesn't want to fall out with the US on this subject. I mean, it has condemned Israel's actions in Gaza, in fact, but it really shows that ultimately Japan has to do what the US says on these kind of issues. And I don't think Shigeru Ishiba will not be at that UN meeting on the 22nd where this all comes up, so he won't have to face that embarrassment.
And just briefly, Fiona, obviously that is the sort of the realpolitik of it, and we can understand why it is expedient politically. Does that align, though, with the view of, the man and woman in the street? Are they also sanguine about that? Is there this tacit acknowledgement that, look, we sort of have to follow what the diktat is from DC? Or actually, do you think there is an internal pressure to maybe view this through a slightly different lens, possibly?
Yeah, I think there are two things going on at once. One is this, crystallization of just how much Japan is sort of enmeshed basically in the US's foreign policy stance. And I think that's one issue. I think the issue of Gaza itself, that's an interesting one. I mean, it's actually on the street pretty quiet about Gaza. There initially were a few protests outside Shinjuku Station, busiest station in Japan. And that pretty much melted away. I don't know if the police came down on these protesters. They were moved off to a sort of side area where no one could see or hear them. And honestly, there hasn't been that much visibility for this cause in Tokyo. I think, Japan has a pacifist constitution, and I think the instinct of most people is they don't want these kind of wars. And Japan's position is it supports a two-state solution. So it's an interesting, I think it's a tightrope for the Japanese foreign minister. Don't envy him. Obviously, Shigeru Ishiba's days as prime minister are numbered. He'll be out. There's an election on October the 4th, which I know we've talked about on our shows. So it's an interesting moment, and that issue is not going to go away. So whoever comes in will have to deal with that when they appear.
Okay, another handbrake turn. Let's talk about Expo. This is a story, I don't know, I was reading a piece from Mainichi about this. Record-breaking numbers, obviously, in sort of general attendance at the Expo. An all-time high, Fiona, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that so interesting? Because I think, like all these big events, there's a bit of cynicism before they actually happen, and a feeling like, do we really need to spend this much money on an expo when the rest of the world isn't really bothered about Expo anymore? It's a thing that has always been very popular here. You had the Expo in Aichi, 2005, which was very, very successful. That did very, very well. And that has been turned into Studio Ghibli's theme park, interestingly. So, I mean, that site has turned into something very, very positive. It's been brilliant for Studio Ghibli. And this Expo in Osaka had many, many problems, starting with construction costs, absolutely massive. Would anyone turn up? We've had this absolutely record-breaking hot summer. So there's quite a lot of negativity. Will people want to go in the summer? As it turns out, they have turned up, and it looks like ticket sales are really, really creeping up, because the whole thing finishes on October the 13th. And it has been hot. It's still hot today. I was out today, 34 degrees, just humidity off the scale. You don't really want to be going around a windswept exhibition, open-air exhibition on the seafront in Osaka. But they're saying if things go as planned, it will make a profit, which was really not looking very likely a few months ago. So, yeah, they're thinking there'll be at least 22 million and maybe more. They're hoping 22 million visitors over the few months. So, yeah, actually, it's kind of a very positive end to what has been a very tricky road, I think, for this event.
Yeah, really interesting. And just briefly, you sort of mentioned the Studio Ghibli, and of course, here in London, post the 2012 Olympics, we then had this huge redevelopment of great tracts of East London. What's happening in terms of what follows this? I know there's various discussions about the sort of preservation of the area and this kind of thing. Do we know what the future of this site is going to look like yet?
We do. There's some discussion about what will happen to, if you've seen anything about the expo, there's this incredible wooden structure, 2 kilometers in circumference, that So Fujimoto, big Japanese architect, he was the master planner for the whole event. He designed this really brilliant, I think, structure that encircles the whole site, and it brings some kind of sense of verticality, some shade, I have to say, to this very, very open site. And I think a lot of people felt, why on earth have we built this wonderful wooden structure only to take it down? So I think some of that will be saved now. The rest of the site, it looks like, will be a park for Osaka City. Much needed, I have to say. It's a city that could do with some more greenery in the centre. And on the it's a tricky site. It's right on the waterfront, reclaimed land, and they are building another thing that's coming up in Japan is this integrated resort, as they call it, which is a casino by any other name, and that is being built next door. So if you go to this expo site today, there are cranes everywhere. There's an awful lot of construction. But it looks like the expo site will be a park for the public, which I think would be brilliant. Since they built they extended the metro to go out to that site, they should do something good for the public, I think.
Definitely. Integrated resort. I love a good sort of pseudo-political euphemism. An integrated resort for the casino is a good one. Fiona Wilson in Tokyo, thanks very much for joining us here on The Briefing. 17 minutes past midday, and we continue our Whistle Stop World tour by alighting right here in London town, where in Studio One I'm joined by Monocle's senior correspondent Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Good afternoon, Faye.
Good afternoon, Tom. Great to be here.
Now, regular listeners may be fearing that you're going to talk about Eurovision. You are, but listen, this is super, super interesting. I mentioned at the top of the show, politicisation, different nations getting involved and trying to leverage the event's pretty significant cultural capital and impact to move the needle on politics. I mentioned, we were talking about Gaza with Fiona just a moment ago. What's the latest? Because nations are they're using Eurovision as a platform.
Absolutely. And Tom, listen, first of all, I have to say, Eurovision has always been political. And I've been covering for Monocle since 2013, and I've been going every year to the finals. Of course, there's always like a little spat between countries. Russia was banned in 2022. But I have to say, in the last 2 to 3 years, the atmosphere is different. I think he removed a little bit of the fun, so it's real stressful because countries, they disagree with each other. It's removing the fun of Eurovision a little bit. So the big story here is that Spain announced that if Israel will be on Eurovision next year, they are going to withdraw from the contest. And this is big news because Spain is one of the big five. And for those who don't know, the big five are 5 countries: Spain, Italy, UK, Germany, and France. And they are the ones who provide the most funding for the event. So if Spain's out, it's going to be, a big financial loss as well for Eurovision, and cultural loss as well, if I may say.
Now, it's interesting because as you reflect there, Faye, Spain follows a few others, the Dutch, Slovenia, Iceland, Ireland, who've made some noise, but as you say, it's not going to hit the event in their pocket. So this is probably something of a key change. What are the prospects of others of the big five? It's interesting, the BBC Director General has, well, I don't know whether you agree with this. He's come out and said, look, it's never been about politics, even though it definitely has to the watcher. But the Brits, I think, are unlikely. Italy, unlikely. I don't know. The French, what's your take on how the others of the Big Five will react to this?
I will tell you in a minute, but I'll just give you the words from what the RTVE from Spain said. The genocide currently taking place make it impossible for us to look the other way. So it's direct. So the message is very clear. And you ask me about other countries. I am pretty sure that other countries will follow. The ones you mentioned already, I have a feeling that in the Nordics, I think there's a lot of controversy already. When you look at Norway, of course, Iceland. From the Big Five, it's a bit more complicated. I don't think the UK or Germany will withdraw, especially Germany because of, the relationship with Israel. France could potentially happen, but I'm just, of course, speculating. But as I said, Tony, then it's not Eurovision anymore. Even if you have, let's say, 10 countries that are not going to be there, I think they really have to have a lot of meetings about it. And usually on Eurovision, by October, you have an idea of who is going to be in or out of the event. But this time they extended the deadline to December. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of stressful meetings at the EBU right now.
Well, yeah, and just briefly on that, you spoke to the previous director, I believe, of Eurovision. And people can read that in the magazine and published it.
Magazine and the website as well.
Yeah. Who's going to have to make the call? I guess it's his successor, right? It's an unenviable task.
It's another Martin, not Martin Osterdahl, but now it's Martin Gring. Yeah, it is a very difficult task. And I think one of the reasons, and again, I'm speculating here, that Martin Osterdahl left, that he was heavily criticized in the last years because, even the artists were infighting. The Dutch contestant had to be removed very last minute, for example. I think there was a political component to that. So Martin Gring has a very tough job. I mean, he did plan the 2023 Eurovision event here in the UK, in Liverpool, which was very successful. I think it was one of the best that I've attended. He was the head of ceremonies of the 2012 London Olympics. He does have a great CV, but this is tough. Eurovision is not an easy. It's a very popular TV show. This year, it broke record of audience around Europe. But it's going to be tough. And I think it's going to be the most political year ever for Eurovision.
Just quickly, Faye, you mentioned the Olympics, of course. I'm immediately struck by, I'll quickly remember, is it 1980, Moscow Olympics? The games went ahead. The United States boycotted. So you had this bizarre thing where it was like the world's best athletes, asterisk, most of them weren't there. And it was good news for some. The UK, we won the 100. The UK won Great Britain won the 100 metres, ridiculously. But that would be it. It would be a sort of weird empty vessel, wouldn't it? If 10, 12, 14 countries aren't there, it wouldn't be Eurovision, no?
Could be the year that San Marino finally win, or even Malta. But, oh gosh, but it's funny, of course, I'm very excited. Next year is going to be in Vienna. It's the 7th Eurovision. So it's going to be, it's a big date for the event. But very, very stressful, Tom. And let's remember here as well, sorry, I keep remembering things, that Israel was second this year. He won the televoting. So, it's not like when Russia was banned. Overall, the countries, they've agreed with it. And there was mild controversy here and there. But with Israel, there are the countries that are against, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that want Israel to remain in the contest.
Faye, this is going to run and run. Well, we know at least until December,
yes,
when countries have to make the decision. Fascinating stuff. And Faye, as our Eurovision correspondent and authority, will be keeping you across it. Faye, thanks for joining us here on The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, Fujikina London is a global photography event taking place this month. It celebrates creativity and community within the photographic world. Plenty on the agenda, including exhibitions of some terrific new work. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by one of the photographers showcasing that at the exhibit, Olivia Arthur. Good afternoon, Olivia.
Hi.
Thanks for coming to see us. Tell me about what you're showing, first of all, because our listeners may be familiar with some of your work, some of your publications, amazing kind of portraiture. You sort of capture, you kind of look at the relationships, intimate relationships between people in a really interesting way. What kind of stuff are you showing as part of this event?
Yes, so I do lots of different things, and as you say, portraiture has always been a big part of my practice. So the work that I'm showing here is part of a big project between Fuji and Magnum, in fact, and it's an unusual kind of project because it's a combination of our new work. So myself and Mark Power, another Magnum photographer, we're both showing work at the exhibition here in London. But the context for it is that we have been looking at some work from the archive, some unseen work from the archive that's been photographed. So using the Fuji cameras, they've been able to scan a lot of unseen work. And so we've made a curation from that, and then in response to it, made our own work. So for my part, I've been making a lot of work around the coast of the UK in the last year or so. And so I kind of decided to bring that in, and the work actually was made in July. So it was this kind of moment, we had such a hot summer. It was
hard to believe now.
I know. Yeah, I know. It does. It's really changed now, hasn't it? It's the beginning of going back into winter. But at that moment, it was really felt okay, British summer can be great. Full of the place was full of energy, and I was going in the archive and looking at this work by my colleagues, from when from when they were much younger. So when I joined Magnum, they were already, my colleagues in the London office were already a bit older than me, a generation older than me, most of them. And so I had a lot of fun kind of going back in and discovering some of that work that is full of energy that, when they were running around photographing. So I sort of focused on the coast, looking for this sort of feeling. And I ended up in summertime, perhaps reflecting, because it was that time of year and there was this energy going around. And then in response to that, made work myself in Margate, in fact, by the coast in Margate on a busy weekend, kind of looking again for that energy.
Yeah, amazing. And it's interesting, and you mentioned Mark, who's another incredible talent, and it's funny because his work, I suppose, often in very large scale, quite epic. That's another interesting juxtaposition, I guess, right?
Yeah,
your
very
work and his,
work,
they kind of mesh interestingly. How fun is that as a practitioner to find those maybe surprising juxtapositions? Because obviously how you present works in the context or alongside other works often throws up these serendipitous contrasts or similarities. That must be one of the great pleasures of getting to do an archive raid and then rethink your own work.
Exactly. And there's definitely, Mark definitely, his work is, as you say, epic, it's formal, it's it's not mostly about people, or it's not portraiture in the way that my work is closer and more about people, and so they sit very differently, and in the exhibition they are, they will be represented very differently. And in this case, I decided to mix my work with the work from the archive. So you'll see, because that was the sort of pleasure that I got when I went into the archive of sort of thinking of those colleagues of mine younger and trying to put my contemporary self with their younger selves and mixing the work together. And that was something that I really enjoyed in this process. And in fact, one of my favourite pictures in the work that I curated is from Chris Perkins, who recently passed away. So again, I'm very happy to be having my work there sitting alongside his.
And it's interesting, this event, obviously, I think there's been these Fujikina sort of shows in different markets. I think there's one in Milan not too long ago. And it's interesting because it sort of brings in, there's a trade kind of component to it, obviously more of a sort of B2B thing, but obviously it's inviting people to get involved. And it's funny, I think, photography as a practice is pretty good at talking to people. Everyone is a photographer now. I don't know where you stand.
Everyone's a photographer.
But it's interesting, and it's funny, do you think these events help to confront people who maybe they're sort of amateur phone snappers to understand that actually there's this whole universe of possibility and there's something incredibly technical and complex that they should get interested in and not just be thinking the phone's the beginning and end? Yes,
I think it's technical, but it doesn't have to be that complex in a way. And I think part of the fact that people are, everybody is a photographer now, and people see themselves as photographers, and they're enjoying it, they're playing with photography. And so something like Fujikina, which is obviously representing the Fujifilm cameras, and the work that we've made for this has been made on those cameras as well, and that's something that we do anyway in our practice. We use these kinds of cameras all the time, but for myself, I use all sorts of different cameras. But it's very accessible, and so people get photography a lot more perhaps than they used to, and they come and they can see the cameras, they can see the work, and it kind of goes, brings it all together. I like that. Now tell us what sort of things are happening. I know there's various sort of events. There's the official opening, which is
on Thursday, I think.
Is that right? That's right, yeah.
What will you be doing? Again, that's sort of buzzing from one place to another. I'm sure you've got loads of meetings.
Yeah.
Just tell us what kind of stuff are you going to
I will be there at the official opening, which is, as you say, on Thursday evening. That will be talking about the work that was made for this commission in the context of our practice.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I think if people search... Well, if they search Fujikina 2025, they can get on the site and find all the specific details. Can I ask you a bit about the Jeddah Diary? But this is going back.
Yep.
I don't know.
Going back, Jeddah Diary, 12. Yeah, it was 13 years.
So, 13 years, goodness. Yeah. And this is amazing work. And again, particularly, I don't know. It's interesting how the perspective of time changes things, because I think we've sort of cracked this veneer of what Saudi is and what the lives that people in Riyadh and other places live since then. So I just wanted to get your take on that, actually, looking back now, because it was pretty groundbreaking at the time.
Yes, and it's interesting that you should say that. I mean, at the time when I made this work and when the book came out, the pictures were published everywhere. It was there was also a time when you could publish a book and get a big spread in a magazine, which you can't really do anymore.
We still do these things.
Yes, I know. but so it was very broadly seen, because this hidden world of Saudi Arabia was just not known. And I was very conscious at that time that I was making work that what I was photographing or what I was seeing and what I was experiencing was going to be a moment in time, and that it wasn't going to be the same. I didn't know which way it would change, but it wasn't going to be like that for that much longer. It was
so you were acutely aware of that? I
was very aware of that when I was making it. It's interesting, because I remember saying that it's not a place. It's so young. It's changed so much so quickly. It was changing, the internet, the way people, the imagery is used, the way people communicate and connect. The work is a lot about privacy, about not being able to photograph. It's about respecting that line, but also how people, the complications of it, the contradictions of it, and it was just the beginning of us all communicating so broadly and sharing pictures so broadly. So, I mean, obviously there's the political part, and Saudi Arabia has changed in lots of different ways since then, but it was just this feeling of such a young society trying to grapple with this thing that was going on, and so it just felt like a slice of time.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I will urge our listeners to check out that work now, and to hear more from you and see more of the new work. As I said, search Fujikina 2025 to find out more. Olivia Arthur, thanks for coming to chat with us. Great to see you. Great to chat to you. Do be sure to head to Fujikina 2025 to find out more, as I mentioned. But that is all we have time for on this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Laura Kramer. Our researcher was Daniela Braw-Smith, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. My thanks to them, one and all. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow noon in London. But that's all from me, Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.